The cold bit into Tay's skin as the cryopod opened. His lungs burned with the first breath. Something was wrong. The lights flickered red instead of the soft blue that meant safety. His body felt heavy as he pulled himself up. The ship was quiet. Too quiet. Tay stumbled through the corridor, his legs weak from months of sleep. The walls were scarred with black marks. Burn marks. His heart raced faster. He touched the communication panel on the wall. Dead. He tried another one. Also dead. The crew quarters were empty. All 20 pods stood open, their glass covers shattered. Inside each pod he found nothing but ash. Tay's hands shook as he checked every single one. His friends, his colleagues, all gone. He was alone. Tay sank to the floor and pressed his hands against his face. The ship had failed. The warp jump had failed. Everyone was dead, everyone except him. Why had his pod survived when the others didn't? The question burned in his mind, but there was no answer. He sat there for a long time, maybe hours, maybe minutes. Time felt strange. Finally, Tay stood up. He was an agriculture specialist, not a pilot, but he needed to understand what happened. The bridge was his next stop. The ship's AI was broken. The screens showed only static and broken code. Through the main window, Tay saw nothing but darkness and distant stars. No planets, no stations, no rescue ships. They were lost somewhere in unknown space. The ship's system gave him one piece of information. Life support was failing. He had maybe 3 weeks before the air ran out. Tay found the emergency kit and checked the supplies. One escape pod remained functional. It had enough power to keep one person alive for 2 months. Maybe long enough for someone to find him. Maybe he should take it now. Leave this dead ship behind? Survive? But something made him hesitate. A sound. Soft and distant. Almost like crying. Tay followed the sound through the damaged corridors. It led him to the cargo bay. The doors were sealed, but the lock still worked. He entered his code and the massive doors slid open. The smell hit him first. Animal musk and something sweet. Then he saw them, creatures, dozens of large containers, most of them dark and silent. But 12 containers still glowed with soft light. Inside each one, a small face pressed against the glass. They looked almost like cats, but larger. Their fur had strange patterns that seemed to glow in the dim light. The creatures were children. Cubs. Tay remembered now. The ship had been carrying refugees, a species called the Velen. They were being transported to a colony world, away from some war. The adult Velen had been in a different cargo bay. Tay ran to that bay. The doors wouldn't open. When he finally broke through, he found only death. The adult Velen hadn't survived the accident. He returned to the cubs. They watched him with large, golden eyes. Scared, hungry, alone, just like him. Tay stood in front of the containers for a long time. The escape pod could only hold one person. These creatures would die here. They were probably going to die anyway. The ship was failing. He didn't know how to care for alien children. He didn't know what they ate or how to talk to them. The smart choice was obvious. Take the escape pod. Survive. Tell someone about the cubs when he was rescued. Maybe they could send another ship. But Tay knew the truth. By the time anyone came back, the cubs would be dead. One of the cubs pressed both paws against the glass. It was the smallest one. Its fur glowed with soft blue patterns. It made a sound high and questioning, not quite a meow, not quite a chirp. Something in between. Tay made his choice. He opened the first container. The cub inside backed away, scared. Tay sat down on the floor and waited. He made himself small and non-threatening. After a while, the cub crept closer. It sniffed his hand. Then it pressed its head against his palm. Tay opened all 12 containers. The cubs gathered around him, uncertain but curious. They were beautiful. Their fur held colors he had never seen, patterns that shifted and glowed. Some were striped, some were spotted. Each one was unique. He needed to find them food. The cargo manifest showed Velen supplies and storage. Tay found containers of what looked like dried meat and some kind of grain. He offered small pieces to the cubs. They ate carefully, watching him. The agricultural bay became their new home. Tay had the tools and seeds to grow food there, but it would take months. For now, he rationed the emergency supplies. The cubs needed more food than him. He would give them his share if necessary. That first night, Tay lay on the floor of the agricultural bay. He had set up a small space for himself with blankets. The cubs explored their new home, careful and quiet. Tay thought about Earth, his family, the friends he would never see again, the life he had lost. Tears ran down his face in the darkness. Something warm pressed against his side. Then another warmth on his other side. The cubs were curling up around him, all 12 of them, making a circle with him in the center. They purred softly, a sound like distant thunder, the smallest one. The blue one, who had pressed its paws to the glass, climbed onto his chest. It looked at him with those golden eyes and made a soft chirping sound. Then it curled into a ball and went to sleep. Tay put his hand on the cub's back. Its fur was softer than anything he had ever touched. The glowing patterns pulsed gently under his fingers, like a heartbeat. He was still alone. The ship was still dying. They would probably all die here together in the cold darkness of space. But right now, in this moment, Tay wasn't completely alone. These small lives depended on him. They trusted him. And somehow, that made the fear a little smaller. Tay closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would figure out how to fix the life support. Tomorrow, he would start growing food. Tomorrow, he would learn how to keep them all alive. Tonight, he would sleep surrounded by warmth and the soft sound of purring. The ship drifted through the void, a small light in the endless dark. Inside, a human and 12 alien cubs slept together, bound by nothing but need and the simple choice to not be alone. 3 weeks passed like a strange dream. Tay learned quickly that caring for 12 alien cubs was harder than any job he had ever done. The cubs woke him every morning by climbing on his chest. They were getting bigger, stronger, more confident. At first, they had been scared of everything. Now they explored every corner of the agricultural bay. They knocked over his tools. They tried to eat the seeds he was planting. They fought with each other and then groomed each other with rough tongues. Tay gave them names. He needed some way to tell them apart. The smallest one, the blue one who had slept on his chest that first night, he called Hana. It meant one in Korean. She had been the first to trust him. Her twin sister, almost identical, but with green patterns instead of blue, became Duri. 2. There was an energetic cub with orange and yellow stripes who never stopped moving. Tay named him Bomb, which meant spring. Another cub, gentle and quiet with silver patterns, became Nari after the lily flower. He named all 12 of them. They seemed to understand that the sounds meant them. When he said Hannah, the blue cub would look up. When he said Bomb, the energetic one would bounce over, but teaching them their names was easy. Understanding them was harder. The cubs made many sounds. Chirps and purrs and low rumbles. Sometimes they clicked their teeth together. Sometimes they made a huffing sound through their noses. Tay tried to learn what each sound meant. A long purr meant they were happy. A sharp chirp meant they wanted something. A low rumble meant they were scared. They also used their bodies to talk. Ears forward meant curious. Ears back meant angry or scared. Tails up meant excited. Tails down meant sad. Slowly, very slowly, Tay began to understand them. One morning, Hana brought him one of his tools. She had carried it in her mouth from across the bay. Tay took it and said, "Thank you." Hana's ears went forward and she purred. The next day, she brought him another tool he needed. Then another. She was learning to help him. Duri started copying her sister. Soon other cubs joined in. They watched what Tay did and tried to help. When he planted seeds, they dug little holes with their paws. When he carried water containers, they pushed smaller containers with their heads. They were smart. Much smarter than he had expected. But then the ship's computer gave him bad news. The orbit was decaying. They were slowly falling toward a massive gas giant. In a few months, the ship would be pulled into the planet's atmosphere and crushed. The food situation was even worse. The Velen supplies were running out faster than Tay had calculated. The cubs needed more food than adult Velen. They were growing. Tay started eating less. He gave the cubs larger portions and kept smaller ones for himself. He told himself it was fine. He could survive on less. Humans were tough. But the cubs noticed. One evening, as Tay divided the food, Hana pushed her bowl back toward him. She sat down and refused to eat. Tay tried to make her eat, but she turned her head away. Then Duri did the same thing. Then Bomb. Soon all 12 cubs sat in front of their full bowls, staring at him. They knew he was hungry. Somehow they knew. Tay's hands shook as he split his small portion into 13 pieces. He gave each cub a tiny bit more and took a tiny bit for himself. Only then would they eat. He sat with his back against the wall, feeling dizzy. The cubs ate quickly and then gathered around him. Hana climbed into his lap. Duri pressed against his side. The others formed a circle, just like that first night. Their fur began to glow brighter. The patterns pulsed together, all in the same rhythm. It was beautiful and strange. Tay felt warmth spreading through his body. Not just the warmth of their fur, but something else. Something he couldn't explain. He felt less hungry, less tired. The dizziness faded. The cubs were doing something to him, some kind of ability. He didn't understand it, but he felt it. "Thank you," he whispered. Days blurred together. Tay worked to fix the ship's life support system. The cubs helped in their own way. They retrieved tools. They kept him company. When he felt frustrated, they sensed it and pressed against him until he felt calm. At night, Tay started drawing pictures on a tablet to communicate with them. He drew a picture of food and pointed to the storage containers. The cubs watched carefully. He drew a picture of water and pointed to the tank. Hana took the tablet from him. Using her claw, she scratched a symbol into the soft surface. It was a circle with lines radiating out. She pointed at Tay. He didn't understand at first. She made a frustrated sound and tried again. She drew the symbol, then pressed her paw against his chest. The symbol meant him. Tay, human, he felt tears in his eyes. She was teaching him her language. Over the next week, the cubs drew more symbols. They showed him their words for food, water, sleep, happy, sad, scared. Tay copied the symbols into his tablet. He created a dictionary. He taught them Korean words too, simple ones. Yes and no, food and water, friend. The word friend made them all purr. One night, Tay collapsed while working on the life support system. He had been eating less and less, trying to make the food last. His body couldn't take it anymore. The world went black. He woke to warmth and light. The cubs had surrounded him completely. Their glowing patterns pulsed so bright the room looked like it was full of stars. They were all making a sound together, high and urgent, a cry for help, but there was no one to help them. They were alone in space. Tay tried to sit up. His body felt weak. Hana pushed him back down with her head. She was stronger than she looked. The smallest cub was now almost as big as a large dog. Bomb ran off and returned with a food packet in his mouth. Not the Velen food, Tay's human rations. The emergency supply he had been saving. The cubs had found his hidden stash. Nari brought water. Another cub dragged over a blanket. They were taking care of him the way he had taken care of them. Tay started to cry. He couldn't help it. He was so tired, so hungry, so alone. They were all going to die here. The food would run out, the ship would fall into the planet. Everything he did was just delaying the inevitable. Hana pressed her face against his cheek. Her fur was soft and warm. She made a low, rumbling purr. The other cubs joined in. The sound filled the room, vibrating through his chest. It felt like they were saying something. Not with words, but with feeling. We're here. You're not alone. We're together. Tay ate the food they brought him. He drank the water. He let them take care of him. That night, as they slept in their usual pile, Tay looked at the cubs in the dim light. They had all grown so much. They trusted him completely. They had learned to communicate with him. They had become something like a family. He didn't know how long they had left. But however much time they had, they would face it together. 2 months had passed since Tay woke up alone. The ship was still dying, but slower now. He had managed to fix some of the life support systems. The air would last longer. The orbit had stabilized a little. They had time. Not much, but some. The cubs were twice as big as before. Some of them reached up to Tay's waist now. They moved with grace and power. Their glowing patterns had become more complex and beautiful. Tay noticed they had a social order. Jin, one of the larger males with deep red patterns, seemed to be the leader among the cubs. The others looked to him first when they were uncertain. But Jin always looked to Tay, waiting for approval. Asking for guidance. It took Tay a while to understand. The cubs saw him as their pack leader. Not their owner. Not their keeper. Their leader. This changed how he taught them. The cubs wanted to learn everything. Tay showed them how to repair simple systems, how to grow plants, how to read the ship's basic controls. They watched with intense focus and copied what he did. Bomb learned to repair wiring. His small paws were perfect for reaching into tight spaces. Nare learned about the medical supplies, fascinated by the equipment. Hannah and Duri worked together to maintain the water systems. They were becoming more than just survivors. They were becoming a crew. The cubs taught Tay their culture too. At night, they drew pictures on the walls with their bioluminescent secretions. The liquid glowed for hours before fading. They drew stories. Tales of Velen heroes and ancient wisdom. Pictures of their homeworld that they had never seen but somehow remembered. Tay watched them create a massive drawing that covered one entire wall. It showed stars and planets connected by lines. A map of some kind. At the center, they drew the symbol for family. Not the symbol for blood relatives, but the symbol for chosen family. Pack. One day, while exploring a damaged section of the ship, Tay found something important. A communications array. It was in bad shape, but not completely broken. With the cubs' help, he spent 3 days repairing it. When they finally got it working, Tay's hands shook as he activated the distress beacon. Maybe someone would hear it. Maybe rescue would come. The response came faster than he expected, a Velen warship. The signal was strong and close. Only 3 months away. They had received his distress call and were coming. Tay should have felt relief. The cubs would be saved. They would go home to their own people. But as he read the message, his blood turned cold. The Velen were at war. Not with some distant enemy, but with the coalition. The human alliance. His people, the warship commander's message was clear. They were coming to retrieve their refugees. Any humans on board would be detained as potential enemies. Tay looked at the cubs playing nearby. Hannah was teaching the younger ones how to sort the medical supplies. Jin was helping Bomb fix a broken panel. They looked happy, safe. What would the Velen warship do when they arrived? Would they see him as a kidnapper? A threat? Would they understand that he had saved the cubs? Or would they see only a human with their children during wartime? And what about the cubs? Would they be taken away and raised as soldiers? Used as propaganda? The message had mentioned retrieving valuable refugees. Not children. Not cubs, refugees, resources. Tay sat in front of the communications panel for hours. The cubs sensed his distress. They gathered around him, making concerned sounds. Hannah pressed her head against his arm. Jin sat next to him, a solid presence. He could send his location. The warship would come. The cubs would survive. That was what mattered, right? Their survival? But Tay had learned something in these 2 months. The cubs were not just animals to be saved. They were people, young people with thoughts and feelings and dreams. They had chosen him as their family. And he had chosen them. Jin placed his large paw on Tay's hand. The cub made a low rumbling sound. It was a question. What's wrong? Tay tried to explain using their shared picture language. He drew the Velen ship. He drew the cubs going away. He drew himself alone. The cubs understood. They looked at each other with their large golden eyes. Then Hannah did something unexpected. She erased part of Tay's drawing. She changed the picture. Now it showed the cubs and Tay together, hiding. The message was clear. Stay together. Don't let them separate us. But you'd be safe, Tay said out loud, knowing they couldn't fully understand his words. Your own people would take care of you. Jin drew another picture. It showed a cub alone, surrounded by strangers. Then he drew a cub with Tay, surrounded by the other cubs. He pointed to the second picture and made the sound for home. They didn't want to be saved if it meant losing their pack. Losing him. Tay made his decision. He disabled the communications array, not just turned it off, but damaged it beyond quick repair. He destroyed the only way to call for help. If the Velen warship came, they would find a dead ship. No signals. No signs of life. They would leave. It was stupid. It was dangerous. It probably meant they would all die together when the food ran out or the ship finally failed, but Tay couldn't give up the cubs. And they had made it clear they didn't want to leave him. That night, the cubs performed something Tay had never seen before. They lined up in front of him, oldest to youngest. Jin stood first. He approached Tay and rubbed his head against Tay's chest, leaving a glowing mark. A symbol in their language. Then each cub did the same thing. One by one, they marked him. Their bioluminescent secretions left patterns on his skin and clothes. The marks glowed brightly. Tay looked at Hannah with confusion. She took his hand and led him to a reflective surface. A polished panel that worked like a mirror. The marks on his body formed a pattern. The symbol for pack, for family, for belonging. The cubs had claimed him as one of their own. Tay felt tears running down his face. He knelt down and the cubs surrounded him. He put his arms around as many as he could reach. "I won't let anyone take you away," he promised. "We stay together." Jin pressed his forehead against Tay's forehead. The cub's eyes glowed bright in the dim light. There was understanding there. Intelligence and love and trust. The other cubs added their voices to a deep, rumbling purr. It was a sound of contentment, of family, of home. Later, as they all settled down to sleep in their usual pile, Tay watched the cubs breathing slowly. The glowing marks on his skin pulsed gently in the darkness. He was marked now, changed. He belonged to them as much as they belonged to him, outside. The damaged ship drifted through space. The Velen warship would pass by in 3 months, find nothing, and leave. They would be alone again, but Tay had made his choice. He had chosen these strange, beautiful creatures over his own species. He had chosen love over logic. He had chosen family over survival. He didn't know if it was the right choice. He only knew it was the only choice he could make. Hannah stirred in her sleep and moved closer to him. Her fur was warm against his side. Her steady heartbeat was like a drum in the quiet ship. Tay closed his eyes and slept, surrounded by his pack. His family. His home? 4 months had changed everything. The agricultural bay was no longer just a survival space. It had become a home. Tay's hydroponic gardens covered half the bay now. Green plants grew in neat rows, reaching toward the artificial lights. Tomatoes, lettuce, beans, and herbs. The smell of growing things filled the air. It reminded Tay of Earth, of his family's small garden, of a life that felt like a dream now. The cubs had helped him build raised platforms in the bay. They slept on these platforms now, too big to all pile on Tay like they used to. But they still took turns sleeping close to him. Last night it had been Hannah and Duri. Tonight, Baum and Jin curled up on either side of his makeshift bed. The cubs had decorated the space with their glowing drawings. Entire walls were covered with artwork. Some drawings showed their culture and history. Others showed their life on the ship. In one corner, they had created a timeline. It started with sad pictures of the accident, then showed Tay opening their containers, then picture after picture of them learning and growing together. Life had fallen into a comfortable pattern. Mornings were for lessons. Tay taught them practical skills and basic science. The cubs were excellent students. Afternoons were for work, maintaining the ship and tending the gardens. Evenings were for food and stories and rest. The cubs had grown large now. Even the smallest, Hannah, came up to Tay's chest. Jin was nearly as tall as Tay when standing on his back legs. But despite their size, they remained gentle with him, careful not to scratch him with their claws. Mindful of their strength, one evening, something special was happening. The cubs had told Tay through their picture language that tonight was important, a ceremony. A coming-of-age ritual from their culture. Tay had found information about Velen ceremonies in the ship's cultural database. He did his best to prepare. He gathered special foods they had saved for this occasion. He helped the cubs create the traditional patterns on the floor using their bioluminescent secretions. The ceremony was beautiful. Each cub stood in the center of the pattern and spoke in their language. Tay couldn't understand all the words, but he felt their meaning, promises, commitments, declarations of who they wanted to become. Jin spoke of strength and protection. Nari spoke of healing and compassion. Hannah spoke of wisdom and loyalty. One by one, each cub defined themselves. At the end, they all turned to Tay. Jin stepped forward and placed something in Tay's hands. It was a small object carved from salvaged metal. A symbol. Tay recognized it from their drawings. It meant pack leader, but also father. Tay's vision blurred with tears. He wasn't their father. He was just a human who had made one decent choice. But to them, he was family. He was home. The next week brought disaster. Bill, one of the younger cubs with violet patterns, became sick. At first, it seemed like a simple illness, but it got worse quickly. The cub couldn't eat, could barely breathe. Her fever burned so hot that Tay could feel it through her fur. Tay searched the medical database frantically. Velen had certain genetic conditions. Some were deadly without proper treatment. Biel showed all the symptoms of one of these conditions. Without the right medicine, she would die within days. The ship didn't have Velen medicine. They had basic human medical supplies, but nothing for this. Tay didn't sleep for 3 days. He researched constantly. He tried every treatment he could think of. Nothing worked. Biel grew weaker. The other cubs stayed close to her, grooming her gently, pressing against her for warmth. On the third night, Biel's breathing became shallow. Tay knew she wouldn't last much longer. He held her weak body and felt completely helpless. Then he remembered something from his research. Velen and human immune systems weren't the same, but they had some similarities. Certain human antibodies might work on Velen diseases. It was a wild theory, untested, dangerous, but Bill was dying anyway. Tay took his own blood. He processed it using the limited medical equipment, separating out the antibodies. He had no way to test if this would work. No way to know if it would help or make things worse. The other cubs watched him with wide, scared eyes. They understood he was trying to save Biel. Jin stood next to Tay, offering silent support. "This might not work," Tay whispered. "But I have to try." He administered the treatment. Then he waited. The cubs took shifts staying awake with Biel. They wouldn't leave her side. Tay stayed awake too, monitoring her vital signs on the medical scanner. Hours passed. Biel's fever began to drop. Her breathing became easier. By morning, she opened her eyes. Tay collapsed in relief. The cubs surrounded him, purring so loudly the floor vibrated. They pressed against him, showing their gratitude in the only way they could. Biel recovered slowly over the next week. She was weak, but alive. The other cubs brought her the best food. They groomed her constantly. They told her stories using their picture language, making her laugh with their chirping sounds. One night, after Biel was fully recovered, the cubs did something Tay didn't expect. They gathered around him with serious expressions. Jin stepped forward, carrying a container of their bioluminescent secretion. The cubs took turns marking Tay's skin. But these weren't temporary marks like before. These were different, deeper. The secretion soaked into his skin, becoming permanent. They marked his arms, his chest, his back. Intricate patterns that glowed softly. When they finished, Hana brought him to the reflective panel again. Tay stared at his reflection. He was covered in glowing Velen patterns. The marks of family, of clan, of belonging. He looked like one of them now, changed, transformed. That night, Tay worked late in the garden. The plants needed constant care. He checked the tomato vines, picked ripe vegetables, planted new seeds. The routine was calming. He stopped for a moment and looked out the small window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his real home. His family, his old life. All of it so far away it might as well be in another universe. A wave of loneliness hit him suddenly. It came without warning, like a punch to the chest. He missed Earth. He missed human voices and human food and human company. He missed his mother's cooking and his sister's laugh and the smell of rain on concrete. I miss home, Tay whispered to the empty space. But the space wasn't empty. Small voices answered him from the shadows, soft chirping sounds. The cubs had been watching him work. They had learned so many Korean words by now. They understood what he said. You home, whispered Hannah's voice, careful and slow. You are home, corrected Jin, his accent strange but the meaning clear. Home here, added Nari softly. The other cubs emerged from the shadows, surrounding him. Their patterns glowed bright in the darkness. They pressed close, offering their warmth and presence. Tay sank to the floor, and the cubs gathered around him. They were right. This was home now, not the ship, not a place. Them, these strange, beautiful creatures who had learned his language and taught him theirs, who trusted him completely, who had marked him as family. Home wasn't Earth anymore. Home was wherever his pack was. Tay put his arms around the cubs he could reach. He pressed his face against Hannah's soft fur. He felt Jin's steady presence at his back, heard Buell's healthy breathing nearby, felt the vibration of 12 purring voices. Thank you, he said quietly. Thank you for being my home. The cubs answered with their own language, a chorus of chirps and purrs and rumbles that meant love and family and forever. Outside, the ship continued its slow drift through space. But inside, in a bay filled with green growing things and glowing patterns, a family slept together, not human, not Velen. Something new, something that shouldn't exist but did, and in the morning they would wake up and face another day together. Because that's what families do. They survive, they grow. They hold on to each other in the darkness and become each other's light. 6 months alone in space. 6 months of survival and growth and building a life from nothing. Tay had long stopped counting the days. Time meant little now. There was only the rhythm of their life together. The ship's sensors detected the approaching vessel on a quiet morning. Tay was teaching Bomb how to repair a complex circuit when the alarm sounded. His blood went cold. Someone had found them. He rushed to the bridge. The cubs followed, sensing his fear. The sensor display showed a ship, large, military-grade. Human design. The Coalition had found them. A message came through the communication system. A woman's voice, clear and professional. This is Captain Yuna of the USS Endeavour Coalition Fleet. We received your distress beacon 6 months ago. We're here to assist. Please respond. Tay stood frozen. He had forgotten about the original distress signal, the one he sent before he destroyed the communications array. The signal had traveled through space for months, finally reaching someone. He should feel relief. Rescue had come. He would see other humans again. Go home, survive. But when he looked at the cubs gathered around him, their golden eyes wide and worried, he felt only fear. Please respond, Captain Yuna's voice came again. We're detecting life signs aboard your vessel. Are you in distress? Tay activated the communication panel. His voice shook. This is Tay, agricultural specialist. I'm okay. There was a pause. Then Captain Yuna's voice returned, filled with surprise and relief. Tay, you're alive? The ship's log showed total crew loss. How did you survive? I wasn't alone, Tay said carefully. 2 hours later, the Endeavour docked with their ship. Tay watched the airlock connect. His heart pounded. The cubs stayed close to him, tense and ready to run. Captain Yuna was the first through the airlock. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and short dark hair. 3 armed soldiers followed her. They stopped when they saw the cubs. What are those? One soldier asked, raising his weapon. They're Velen, Tay said quickly, stepping in front of the cubs. Children, they survived the accident. I've been taking care of them. Captain Yuna stared at him. Her eyes moved from Tay to the cubs, then to the glowing marks covering his skin. You've been living with Velen for 6 months? They needed help, Tay said. They were alone, they were going to die. One of the soldiers spoke into his radio. Command, we have a situation. Survivor is living with enemy aliens, possible psychological trauma. They're not enemies, Tay said loudly. They're children. Captain Yuna held up her hand, silencing the soldier. She approached slowly, studying the cubs. Jin stepped forward, positioning himself between the captain and the younger cubs. A protector. How old are they? She asked. Young, maybe equivalent to human teenagers now. They were smaller when I found them, and they haven't hurt you? Hurt me? Tay almost laughed. They saved my life. Multiple times. We're a family. The captain's expression was unreadable. Tay, you know there's a war happening. The Velen and the Coalition are in active conflict. These cubs are enemy nationals. They're children, Tay repeated, his hands clenched into fists. They don't even know there's a war. They've never hurt anyone. Captain Yuna looked at him for a long moment, then she spoke into her radio. Medical team, prepare for evacuation. One human survivor, signs of severe stress and possible Stockholm Syndrome. We'll need psychological evaluation. I don't have Stockholm Syndrome, Tay said angrily. I chose to stay with them. I chose to protect them. Tay, the captain's voice softened. You've been through trauma. The accident, losing your crew, being alone. It's understandable that you formed an attachment to these creatures, but we need to get you home, get you help. And what happens to them? Tay demanded. Captain Yuna exchanged glances with her soldiers. They'll be taken to a coalition research facility. For their safety, we'll make sure they're cared for. No, Tay's voice was flat and hard. No, you won't take them. Tay, be reasonable. They're my family. The words burst out of him. They trust me. They need me. I won't let you take them to some facility where they'll be locked in cages and studied. Behind him, the cubs made distressed sounds. They couldn't understand all the words, but they understood the threat. Hannah pressed against Tay's leg. Jin's fur stood on end. One of the soldiers stepped forward. Sir, we have orders. The cubs are to be detained for intelligence purposes. Intelligence? Tay felt sick. They're children. They don't know anything about military operations or war strategies. They know how to grow tomatoes and fix water pipes. That's all. Tay, you don't understand the political situation, Captain Yuna said. These cubs could be valuable. They could be used to negotiate with the Velen to save human lives. By using children as hostages? Tay moved backward, the cubs moving with him. I won't let you. You don't have a choice, the captain said, her voice hardening. Soldiers, prepare to secure the cubs. Use tranquilizers if necessary. The soldiers raised their weapons. Not guns, but tranquilizer rifles. The cubs saw the threat. They bared their teeth, making deep warning sounds. They positioned themselves in a defensive formation around Tay. Stand down, Tay said to the soldiers. Don't point those at them. Tay, move away from the cubs, Captain Yuna ordered. Let us help you. I don't need help. Tay pulled out a device from his pocket. A remote control for the bay doors. Leave us alone or I seal this bay. Your soldiers won't get through those doors quickly. Don't be stupid, the captain said. You can't stay on this ship forever. The life support is failing. You'll die. Then I die with my family, Tay said simply. I won't abandon them. I won't let them be used as tools in your war. The standoff lasted for a long, tense moment. The soldiers kept their weapons trained on the cubs. The cubs growled and hissed, ready to fight. Tay stood between them, one hand on the door control, the other resting on Jin's head. Then something unexpected happened. The youngest cubs, the ones who had stayed back, moved forward. They didn't attack the soldiers. Instead, they positioned themselves between the soldiers and Tay, creating a living shield. They were protecting him. Just like he had always protected them. One soldier lowered his weapon slightly. Captain, these don't look like enemy combatants. They look like scared kids. Captain Yuna watched the scene. Her expression changed, softened. She saw Jin standing tall and protective, saw Hana pressed against Tay's side, saw Byul and the others willing to put themselves in danger for this human. She raised her hand. Stand down, lower your weapons. The soldiers obeyed, looking confused. The captain approached slowly, her hands visible and empty. She stopped a few feet from Tay. Tell me the truth. If I take you and leave the cubs, what will happen to them? They'll die, Tay said. Or worse, they'll become prisoners, test subjects, political tools, and if I take the cubs and leave you, I'll die. And they'll be traumatized and alone with people they don't trust? Captain Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. I have a daughter. She's about the same age as these cubs, if I'm guessing right. If something happened to me, if I died and left her alone in a scary place, I'd hope someone like you would protect her, even if it was dangerous, even if it was stupid. She looked at the cubs, then back at Tay. What you've done here, it's insane. It goes against all logic and protocol. But maybe that's what makes it right. What are you saying? Tay asked carefully. I'm saying that Coalition Command wants these cubs. They've already sent orders. But orders take time to reach a ship that's far from home. She smiled slightly. And my communication system just developed a malfunction. By the time I get it fixed and receive those orders, you'll be long gone. Tay stared at her. You'd let us go? I didn't see any Velen cubs on this ship, Captain Yuna said clearly. I found a damaged vessel with no life signs, a dead ship. Nothing worth investigating. My crew will confirm that report. One of the soldiers started to protest, but the captain silenced him with a look. There's an independent colony on a moon 3 weeks from here, she continued. Neutral territory. They accept refugees from both sides, people who don't want to fight. If you could make it there, you'd be safe. Our ship barely works, Tay said. I don't know if we can make that journey. Captain Yuna smiled. Then it's good that we brought extra fuel cells and repair equipment. Strange how that cargo is going to accidentally stay behind when we leave. She turned to her soldiers. We saw nothing here. Understood? The soldiers exchanged glances. Then, one by one, they nodded. Understood, Captain. 2 days later, the Endeavour left. They left behind fuel, supplies, and detailed coordinates to the neutral colony. Captain Yuna's final message was simple. Take care of them. And let them take care of you. Tay stood in the bridge with all 12 cubs around him. On the screen, he could see the Endeavour jumping to warp speed, disappearing in a flash of light. They were alone again. But this time they had a destination. A chance. A future. Jin pressed his large head against Tay's shoulder. Hannah purred loudly. The other cubs added their voices, creating a chorus of hope and relief. 3 weeks, Tay said to them. We can make it 3 weeks. The cubs chirped in agreement. They had survived 6 months. They could survive 3 more weeks. Together, they always survived together.